Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with you some of the things we've done with bioinformatics over the last 25 years. One thing that's important I have a couple of slides about it in the beginning, but you have to set yourself back 25 years ago, right? And so this is before the human genome came out. I remember the second workshop, one of the TAs told me, "Oh, I just saw there's this new search tool called Google." So this is before Google. And so it was Brad McLean who told me about Google. And at the beginning of the workshops, we didn't have the domain name reserved. It was something else. And so you have to think about that when you go through it. Like usual, I have a CC BY and CCSA license at the beginning of my talks. So share alike and attribute. And basically, this is a summary of my work, of my presentation today. So we've delivered in the last 25 years so far this year, up to this year, some still not given this year, 169 workshops. And I've moved across the country a few times, and the workshops have moved with me. And but there's some parts which have stayed at certain places and so forth. But that's basically the summary of my talk. So I'm going to talk about what predated the workshop was an assessment of the needs for the community. And then I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about the first workshop and how we got that one going, and then plan for the other 168 workshops and some of the important assets that we've developed over the years and lessons learned. So before I went to Vancouver and started working on the workshop, I was at NCBI. So I was a Gen Bank coordinator. And while I was still at NCBI, I got recruited. And actually, the year before, I gave a talk at UBC and with the Peter Wall Foundation, and I talked about pathogens and databases for pathogens and stuff like that. But it was there that I met my boss to be that then recruited me and invited me to come to Vancouver. And that was Michael Hayden. And Michael Hayden was the head of a new research center called the Center for Molecular Medicine and Therapeutics. Oh, the slide problem? Okay. Beautiful slide. There we go. Are we good? We're good? Thank you. So, yes, so Michael Hayden was a human geneticist, but he was also the scientific director of the Canadian Genetic Disease Network. And within that network, they had money to fund a bioinformatics core facility for which one of the main tasks was going to be to set up some workshops, some bioinformatics workshops. And so it's through the Canadian Genetic Disease Network that Bioinformatics.ca came to be. I was sort of almost 10 years at UBC, and then the first 5 years was at the CMMT, and the second 5 years I was at Phil Heater, who was at the CMMT, also went to the Michael Smith Labs and was director and recruited me there. So okay, now my slide changer doesn't move.
Bring your cursor.
Is it your cursor? My cursor, I have to move it to that slide? No. Okay, now it's moving. Okay. Okay, so so this is in September. This is a document that came out in October 98, but in September, which was still a draft. Yeah. We wrote enabling Canadian bioinformatics capabilities that was funded and supported by the Biotech Canada Human Resource Council. And so they're, get to think back now, you're in 1998, human genome's big thing, and pharma doesn't have enough computational biologists. The human genome is about to come out for a few years later. And so there's a lot of excitement. So this task force sort of put a proposal to start a workshop series. And basically they designed the first workshop and they put everything in there. And this is only half of the document. So they wanted you to understand nucleic acids, protein, 3D structures, bibliography, PubMed, OMIM, SciBlast, Blast, mass spec, sequence manipulation, ClustalW, GCG, state and package, DNA star, BioTools. Those are all commercial packages, and putting it all together. So who are the authors of this document? Well, some people you will recognize. And so there was a gang of us that were then sort of called upon by the CGDN, the Canadian Genetic Disease Network, of which Stephen was a sort of a senior manager, and invited those people highlighted to put a workshop together. And so this was the first gang that put the workshops together. So François Major from University of Montréal, Chris Hogue, Christophe Sensen, myself, and David Wishart, and Stephen Hurst from the CGDN. Three of us were from NCBI. We knew each other from NCBI. So we had sort of worked together before. We all spoke ASN1. You understand that joke. And we were able to put something together. And we had a meeting in Halifax in '98, and a good time was had by all. And one of the structures of the workshop that we came on quite early in our thinking was to have basically lecture and labs, and to have in a module, and then to have 2 of these modules per day, and then you sort of have multiple days with this kind of module. And so for each student, we provided them a PC in which everything was preloaded. We had a Unix server in the room that had all the bells and whistles of had blast databases and stuff like that, so they could all do that locally. And we had the printed lecture material was 2 4-inch binders of lecture notes, and they also get a mouse pad. So this was what the room looked like. The first lab where we taught this was at University of Calgary. It was a wonderful teaching lab because it had room for about 100 people, and we had 50 students. So each student had basically 2 spots, and in the back there was another like 20 seats for all the TAs and faculty, and all TAs and all faculty were there for the whole 2 weeks. And so, which never happened again after this workshop. And so this was the logo at the time. This is the mouse pad. And this is a shout out to Ryan Brinkman, who's actually did the first few websites and that was the logo at the beginning of the Bioinformatics workshops. But he also says, oh, Francis, I just checked, and Bioinformatics.ca domain name appears to be free on the internet. I said, oh, let's get that. And we've had that ever since. So we did pack those 2 weeks quite extensively, and we actually had an advisory board later on told us you should give your students maybe like a day and a half break in the middle. And he said, oh, okay, yeah, we hadn't thought about that. But anyway, and we also had the concept that we had about a 3-to-1 ratio of biology to CS students applied and accepted in the workshop. And so we had on day 1, we had actually broke down a track for biologists and a track for computer scientists. And we showed the biologists, we dissected the computer like it was a cell. And so we showed them all the parts of the computer and so forth. So this was the workshop. So it shows you at the beginning there, the 2 tracks, but it's sort of, and it doesn't quite follow the module setting I told you about, but that became more the norm later on. So this is week 1, this is week 2, and there's a lot of RNA structure because we had an RNA structure instructor. There's a lot of protein stuff. There's a lot of RNA, genomic stuff and so forth. So at the beginning, we had 4 workshops. So a 2-week long bioinformatics workshop, and then 1 week for genomics, 1 week for proteomics, and 1 week for developing the tools. So I've been at this about 30 minutes, and I've got about 10 minutes. But I've done 1 workshop, and there's 164 more workshops. So I'll do the proteomics workshop was intro to proteomics, mass spec, protein databases, protein structures, protein-protein interactions, homology modeling, threading with the lab, and structure alignment. The genomics lecture, SRS and Entrée, ACE-DB. Some of you remember ACE-DB? Yeah. Sequence-ready physical mapping, because the genome hadn't come out yet, right? So you had a lot of mapping still. Whole genome sequencing. We actually assembled lambda phage. And ESTs, microarrays, SNPs, and so forth. And the tools, there was a lot of sequence comparison, neural network, algorithms, and so forth. And so we gave certificates, and this was actually a very painful bureaucratic step because it was signature from 3 different universities, and it basically would get signed by the presidents of those universities, but it would sit on their desks for months. And so they would have piles, you know, and it would be 2 months at UBC, 2 months at the University of Toronto, 2 months at the University. Anyway, so you do 1 workshop plus 2 others, and you get a certificate. So this is the class of 2003 that got their certificates. And I just want to highlight one person here. And there's actually another person on here. I think she's hiding behind this list. Yeah, I'm not going to mention her, but we'll talk about her later. Anyway, so for the first 8 years, we did 30 workshops, about 1,250 BOS. You know what a BOS is? A bum on seat. So because sometimes it's the same person, right? So it's not 1,200 different people, it's 1,200 bums. And so did 9 proteomics, 8 genomics, and 7 proteomics, and 6 developing the tools workshop. So then I moved to Toronto, not for the Maple Leafs. And no, when I came to Toronto was actually because Tom Hudson, who was a former CGDN PI, formerly at the McGill Genome Center, moved to Toronto, which was a big shock to me because a French-Canadian guy to move to Toronto is unheard of, and invited me to apply for a position there. And he had also recruited, and I said, oh, can I become director? He says, no, I have somebody else. You have somebody else? Lincoln Stein. Oh, okay. And so I was associate director to Lincoln for 10 years. And I also recruited Michelle, who was in British Columbia at the time, to come with me to Toronto. And she was also responsible for CBW and for outreach at OICR. And one of the big things is that OICR was definitely, and Tom and Lincoln and everybody else was totally committed to the CBW. So the CBW did very well during its period at OICR, and you can see that here. We introduced many new workshops, and it's done very well. So whilst at the OICR, so in 2006 or 2007 was the last time we did the 4 workshops, they were actually starting to become less popular, and we had fewer applications. And the reason is that there were introductory workshops. And so most universities we're in 2006, 2007, most universities are actually offering these workshops. And so we had to change our mode. And so we went to shorter format, so 2-3 days, and we did more advanced type workshops. And so it was more next-gen sequencing, it was statistics, pathways, and so forth. And so, and also we switched the fact that we weren't providing computers anymore, so the students had to show up with their own computer, and we also had a new web development team working for us at the OICR. So this is just a sampling of the types of workshop we were offering during those 10 years. So cancer genomics, epigenomics, high throughput sequencing, machine learning, metabolomics, microbiome analysis, pathways, and RNA-seq. So this is a listing with the details of all the courses from 2015. And one thing we did introduce, I think it was the year before, we started doing workshops in Cold Spring Harbor. And so we did the cancer genomics one and the high throughput biology, which was basically a mixture of the high throughput sequencing, RNA-seq, and pathways. And that was a 1 week long workshop idea. But we did all the other workshops, and it was a little hard because it was a mixture of these 3 workshops, and it meant that the instructor for those workshops had to do it twice that year, do it this first time. And so you could sort of hearing some rumbling a little bit amongst the instructors. Also, it's important to keep in mind that now, especially during this time, CBW is not living in a vacuum. There's actually the ISCB Education Committee that we're part of. We're part of Ouellette. I was started to be on the Elixir SAB, so I was very much aware of sort of education activities within SAB, the Elixir, I mean, and we also, it was important, I think, to publish stuff, to get out there our ideas, our modes of thinking about training, and there are several papers that came out during that period, during the that period while I was at OICR. So that was OICR, and then I moved to McGill, or actually moved to Montreal, and I left OICR and was in Quebec, and we got Guillaume to help us support the bioinformatics out of McGill University. I had myself a new position at Genome Quebec, and then also another position at the McGill Neuro. And the 2020 season, as you all remember, was the COVID year, and so we moved on a dime everything to virtual delivery, and we introduced Slack in the Bioinformatics.ca. We, of course, Zoom, and I myself had to stop working in the CBW in 2021 because I now had an employer who was no longer supporting the CBW the same way I'd had in the past. And so it was sort of a bit of a conflict, and so I decided to retire from CBW. And because of that, and because I left things in a shambles, we actually skipped 2022. And so we didn't offer, there was no CBW offering. If you ever see a CBW course from 1922, you know it's a fake. And but it got picked up again in 2023 at the OICR. And Guillaume is giving keynote tomorrow morning, so don't miss that. So this is the last year I was involved with that. So all the workshops are virtual, but it's the same sort of flavor, the pathway, machine learning, cancer, microbiome, and so forth. So COVID, a gap year, and then now 2023 to present at OICR, or I call it OICR 2. So I'm less involved. So this is actually more from an outsider's perspective, although I still talk to Michelle. And so Michelle is the lead on this at this point, and she is helped with by Nia, and very active. Uptakes, workshops pick up, and people are, oh my God, the workshops, where were they? And so they're back, and there's a mixture of virtual and face-to-face. It's very funny when you ask instructors if they prefer face-to-face. Some really love the face-to-face, and some are in love with the virtual. So it's a interesting mix. And we also learned from our African friends on how to do this network simultaneous venues. And so that's a very useful thing that we applied to the workshops. And new workshops are also introduced. So this is a quick summary of what's offered this year. And if you have any questions, I invite you to come to the booth, and where these 3 fine people would be happy to help you with any questions you may have about the workshops. So the .ca of bioinformatics.ca has always been very important to me. That said, it should be very clear that this is a somewhat lopsided sort of representation of Canada. So only 50% of the workshops were in Toronto, 14% in Vancouver, 8% in Montreal, 12% virtual, and the rest in 9 different cities. So it's not that we don't go to the other cities, but we definitely prefer Toronto. And not me, but anyways. But the thing is, whenever there's stress or challenges or financial constraints, it's easier to do at home. That's just a given. And Toronto YCR offered us a beautiful teaching room. I mean, we just had the best sort of place to do the teaching at YCR. And we've experienced many teaching rooms across the country, and not all are the same. The other sort of theme that sort of stayed behind all that is open science. So there's no commercial software, although there was at the beginning, but we got rid of that idea. And we eventually, 2005, 2006, we started making all our material openly available afterwards. We had, of course, the data is open also, but we have some challenges, of course, with the controlled data, like human genome stuff. And fair training is important, and video lecture. We have a YouTube channels with our lecture material. And so here I just show a bioschema for training material that Michelle and Patricia are part of. Things we haven't done great so far, but are planning to change. One thing is gender balance of the trainers, bilingual delivery. We talked about that a bit earlier today. Visible minorities, Indigenous nations training and data usage, and better distribution across Canada, and post workshop survey. We basically only did it once in the 25 years, where like 2005, I think it 16. Was 16. Yeah, 2016. So 8 years ago, we did a survey of all the mailing list of everybody that had ever taken the workshop. So like from 99 to 2016, where has bioinformatics had any impact on your life, sort of type of questions. And it turned out to be an interesting paper, but I think it's something we should do more frequently to and target to, for those of you who did it 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and see what happens there. This is from a 2003 presentation by a CGDN person, and they had an acknowledgement slide. And there's one woman in this slide, and it's Fiona Brinkman. And so that was 2003. I mean, this is like a long time ago, 20 years ago. Today, if I look at the landscape, I see about 40% women. And so it's changed. It's still not 50-50. But I think, and if I look at Elixir, and if I look at how many out of all the nodes at Elixir, how many are head of education and training, I'd say it's probably more like 60-70% women, and not as low as 40%. But so there's room for improvement. Also, Michelle, in this last year, has led many meetings and involved many of us across Canada, and responding to a call from CIHR, which was one of the main funders of health research in Canada. And they had a call for health research training platform. I said, well, that's for us. They're asking us to submit. And it was a lot of money, and for 6 years, and we got 72 investigators together to put in this application. And the anticipated notice of decision is August 1st. Tick-tock. But we should hear soon, positively, I hope. I mean, we have everybody in the country that's worked on this thing. So I call this Bioinformatics.ca 2.0. And so that's what we're calling it internally. Not sure if it's going to stick, but anyway, it's so lessons learned from Bioinformatics.ca workshops. So you need a team of very zealous people. If you don't have zealous people, it's not going to work. You need to know and understand your student population. You need leadership with institutions that support them. If the institutions where your leaders work at is not supported, it's not going to happen either. You need to make a good product that is relevant to the community. And so changing in 2007 to these shorter, more targeted, more advanced type workshops was an adjustment that was critical and made allowed us a mode to change and adapt. You need to evolve, so we have to update our material. Obviously, we have to add stuff, but there's also a couple of workshops we don't do anymore, and so we've deleted those, and they weren't successful. They didn't quite work, and so we removed them. You need to have instructors that are representative of the community you're serving. You need to be open. You need to market your product. You need to network with other instructors from the Goblet community, from other communities, or like the meeting that they had in New York recently. And you need to train the next generation of instructors and empower them. So they need to become the force that drives, the same way I trained Michelle, and now she's taking over. So here's some marketing things from my desk. I wear that toque all year round. No, not year round, in the winter. And the most important asset in my mind has been, since the beginning, it's clear to me that the most important asset is the instructors. They know, they tell you how a workshop is delivered, when a workshop is given, how often a workshop is given, how long and how simple or complicated a workshop should be. And we value them so much that we actually pay them. And we've organized M&Ms. We don't do M&Ms anymore, but we did mentor network meetings, and we had education advisory board meetings, and where instructors come and we get their feedback, and it's very important. I would like to highlight one instructor of the many that we've had. He was one of the 5 founders. David Wishart was one of the 5 founders of CBW. He was at the University of Alberta Distinguished Professor in computer science and biology. He's open science, computational biology, proteomics, metabolomics, and machine learning instructor. He's the only one of all of us that's been there the 25 years. And so he's still active and proposing new workshops, and was part of the grant, and it's been and best long-time standing CBW instructor, period. We would, at the beginning, when we were both teaching in the same courses, you do the course evaluation and you rate your instructors. He was always rate more than me, and it just like bugged me. And I tried to be better, but he was always better. And I could see why. He was a good instructor, and so it was quite. Anyway, he's a special instructor. So these are some of the other instructors, and this is some more of the other instructors. And so we'll show these slides again at the party, so you can look at them, look for yourself. And so another important asset is the sponsors. So CW would not have been possible without the many sponsors. Host institutions are key. So to have places like OICR or UBC hosting our workshops has been key. The funders, national and provincial, and the service providers, things like Compute Canada and so forth, have been key. Industry has helped also, and foundations, and some of it with cash, but some of it with their time and their resources and so forth. And one institution that stands out here is the OICR. They've been a champion of CBW. But here are the other ones. And so there are many other institutions, many other groups that helped us with CBW, and they've been all wonderful. So I'm finished. So I'm on time. We're celebrating tonight. So the location is 710A. So we're in 5th floor here, 5 something. And so that's 2 floors up from here. And there's only going to be one escalator working, it turns out. And it's the one right by the registration desk. So if you go by the registration desk, you'll see there's one escalator that's working to go up. That's the only one to go up. You need to have on your badge a red star. If you do not have a red star, that means you did not give us any money. Yet. So you can buy a ticket at the door, and it's $20 for if you register in the conference, and $50 if you're not registered in the conference. So I'm going to end it there and say, oops, merci.
I will speak on behalf of all the Canadians, but I know, Francis, we are very indebted to you. Bioinformatics in Canada would not be where it is today without your contribution. So thank you for that, and for giving us the tour of that over time. I open it to questions, please.
Michelle, can I make a comment on behalf of the rest of the world? On behalf of the rest of the world, who have not just watched what you have done, but have actively learned and been partners, we wish to thank you.
It's pointless me saying anything now because Wynn's just said exactly what I was going to say. Thank you, Francis. Hi. So you mentioned that universities were kind of picking up the introductory level courses and things like that. Have you found that as time goes on, that becomes more and more the case, that universities are pulling things out of your courses, and then you have to, keep moving along?
I think the CBW model is it will always need to keep along. It will always need to go to the that's a tough measure. It's a tough thing to do. One thing I have looked at is the programs in Canadian universities at the undergraduate, graduate levels, and there are more and more universities doing stuff. So quantitatively, there's definitely a lot more, and more in places where you didn't have stuff in the beginning, like in the Maritimes or other provinces. But what I cannot say is if it's good, because I haven't measured it. Yes.
Thank you so much. Bioinformatics.ca were always an inspiration for everyone. Yeah, just rephrasing what everybody else said as well. And with something that you said about the gender balance, and from the elixir perspective, it's true that we have a lot of women taking care. You see, but it's not because we are trainers, we are the training managers or the training coordinators that we call majority of women. What we can do then to empower women to teach. I know that the difficulty is that women have also plenty of other things, and to prove that they are good researchers. So it's difficult to have spare time for training. It's always secondary, no?
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do in that perspective?
I'll let Michelle answer that, because I'm sure she wrote a section about that in the grant.
So, I think one of the first things is going to find those women and ask them to teach, because we get stuck with who we know. Yeah. And so part of it, I think, is getting outside of your comfort zone and seeking out women in particular. But in our 2.0 grant, we wrote opportunities for women, and the awards will only be for equity seeking groups, women included. Yeah, and that's it.
And visible minorities, and
other,
and First Nations.
First Nations and other challenges for sure.
Yeah. So we have, for example, to follow up on what Michelle just said, there's an organization called Swiss, I can never pronounce it properly, and that is dedicated to women in science and technology activities in Canada. And so I think one thing would be to approach them and ask them, do you want some people from your gang to come and play with our gang? And And so I think that's going to be something that we're going to do in the future, if and when we get supported. Yeah.
Yes, Nia. Wow.
Well, on that note, I just want to point out that the workshop that happened earlier this week, the entire TA and faculty team, led by Shamini back there, were women. So, yeah.
Okay.
So it's party time. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Starts at 6 o'clock.
We're going at
It's
6
now
o'clock.
5:57.
Okay, thank you everybody for
It'll take you
just,
3 minutes to get up there.
if you were at all involved or used workshop content over the years, I think on behalf of Francis and Nia and myself, thank you, because the use of our resources and materials, it creates a need for what we do, and so then we have jobs. So thank you to all of you.